Meg, thank you so much for coming on the AIM podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you in a sort of face-to-face sense now.
100%. I'm really excited after getting to chat with you a little bit the other day and I'm just pumped to dive into your story, honestly, and hear more about your background. Obviously, the most recent amazing accomplishment that you've had of breaking the Hyrox World Record for women, running the first sub 60 time, which is absolutely incredible. But I'm really, really excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a fun week to put it lightly. So,
100%. Well, before we dive in, I have to ask, did you end up doing the row sit-up workout yesterday?
no, I'm gonna do it today.
Okay.
I'm actually gonna have so I actually I kind of lead a group class, a Hyrox style workout. With like it started with just my friend group and it's like expanded quite a bit. So sometimes there's like 20 to 25 people there.
Wow.
So that's going to be our finisher in our workout tonight. And I appreciate this is why I love Instagram so much because I love seeing people's like ideas and the things they come up with for workouts. And I like to like plug them in and into like what I'm doing. So I was like, oh, I really like that one, you
I
know.
love
I don't know if my friends will like it as a finisher,
it.
but
Yes, I
but
love
it'll be
that.
good.
For all the listeners, the workout is 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and it's calories on the row right into sit-ups. So really the actual workout is GHD sit-ups, but I just did normal sit-ups. That would be pretty intense, but it's a
Yeah,
good workout. It's super fun.
I might do GHD because I weirdly love how sore I get from I'm like, yes, I feel like I'm like, yeah, I got abs now, you know, just from like the crazy soreness that you get from doing those. So,
No doubt. Well, I'm super pumped. I can't wait to hear how that goes. And I want to dive into this before we like really talk about Hyrox though. I think it'd be cool for the listeners to understand and hear more about your background of just getting into fitness, getting into running, getting into sport. Like I would love to hear kind of what that process looked like from, an early age and kind of where it's led you today.
yeah, so we have the basketball like upbringing in common. When you said you were played in college, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I've played since I was 5 years old, and that was always my favorite sport by far. As I got a little bit older, actually, probably in like, well, I shouldn't say older. This is like I was still a child, but when I was in about fourth or fifth grade, my best friend growing up, her cousin is actually Molly Huddle, who is a super famous American distance runner. Um, she was in high school at the time, and we lived in the same like section of New York. So my dad started bringing me occasionally to some of her track meets, like the bigger ones on like this, you know, the state qualifiers or whatever. She was breaking like every state record at the time. And I think she was only doing track, and I think she played soccer, then switched over to cross country, like same thing, winning states. Um, Arguably one of the best female runners to ever come out of New York State and has been pro, um, for many, many years now. So I was really lucky because I remember watching her for the first time and saying to myself, like, I want to be just like her. And that was like my first real look into the track and running world. Um, and I knew I was fast. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is something I eventually want to do. So by the time I got to the modified level in middle school, where you could first start running cross country for your school team, obviously I did that. And very early on, knew like by the time I was in eighth grade, I knew I had the potential to pursue this at the collegiate level. So I know this sounds crazy, but that was pretty much my goal from the time I was like 12. Um, and I was just one of those kids that my parents really instilled that work ethic in me. My brother's actually to this day a professional bodybuilder. So we both just have this really intense desire to like push ourselves past what we think we're capable of. And that really started pretty early on for me. So I was just a very intrinsically motivated person, just in general. And I think that that's been a huge key to my success,
Sure.
just overall, just kind of having that like internal desire to be my best self always. So I did, I achieved that first goal with getting a scholarship to a Division I college. I went to UConn. I'm very fortunate because I'm sure you can relate with your basketball story. It's like getting to that level is the amount of work and time put in, it's like the 1% of the 1% who really make it to that point. So like that was just a huge dream for me. And I did like decent in college. Like I ran pretty well my first 2 years, and then my second 2 years like kind of went through a lot of injury stuff. And so it certainly wasn't perfect, and I wasn't like winning anything crazy. I was just always like a really solid performer, and just but you knew what you could expect from me. I think my coaches always knew like Megan's like just kind of a clutch grinder athlete. Like we know she's just gonna like lay it all out there. And I was never the most talented, but I was certainly not getting outworked. So that was kind of my thing, I guess.
I love it. That's such a cool story. And you talk about, you loved the game of basketball. What was it about running though specifically that really drew you in, that you just enjoyed about, maybe it was the physical part or the mental part? What was it about running that really got you excited?
I loved that it was you versus you, and that it was so individual. Like, I think the cool thing about individual sports, I love team sports. I loved the camaraderie of being on a basketball team. My team was actually very good. We made like the state playoffs every year, and we'd lose in like the first or second round to like a team from New York City or something. But like we were always really, really good, and we had awesome coaches. And so I loved being a part of that teamwork atmosphere. But I also loved that running was both a team sport, but also super individual. It really made me push my boundaries as a person. And you don't have anyone to pick you up if you're having, not your best performance. That just literally comes down to you.
Yep.
There's no subs in a 5K cross country race or in a 3,000 meter steeplechase. So you have to kind of have that mind over matter ability when it isn't going well. And we all know like the amount of times it's going 100% perfect is typically few and far between. So you're just growing as an individual constantly, I think, because a lot of the times it's not going to go the way you are hoping it will go. And you have to figure out how to push through that. So I loved that about running.
Yeah, that makes
So
it makes a ton of sense. I completely agree. I was never a high level runner. I was fortunate to play basketball, but after I got done playing basketball, that's when I started to get more into running, and I ran a marathon. I've done a half, and then in March I ran a 50 miler with my business partner Lucas. And that just there's so many things that you just unlock about yourself when you run. Like again, I'm not trying to push running on everyone. Some people like to do other things, and that's cool, but there are things that you just don't know about yourself that you end up discovering through that modality that's super interesting about what you're capable of, what your mind's going to allow you to do. It is really fascinating.
yeah, I totally agree. So that's probably like what made me really fall in love with it. Other than like, of course, I was fortunate to have a lot of early success, and that always helps like fuel the interest. If you're
Sure.
good at something, usually you're like, okay, this is pretty cool. But yeah, definitely that. And I still have those, like every race I ever do, whether it's a flat out run or a Hyrox or whatever, like I'm constantly still learning. And I've been doing this for 16, 17 years of my life now, and I'm still constantly learning new things about myself. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. We've had on some runners on the show, and this is an interesting question, and just other high performers in general. But as you and you kind of touched on it, but I want you to go a little deeper here. As you work hard and like really dedicate yourself to something and see success, How do you think that fuels your motivation? Do you think that's something that people like, if they just stay consistent, continue to work and start to see the progress, do you think that's a really important factor in just your overall motivation or desire to do something?
Yeah, I think running is one of those things where I feel like you have to have a lot of patience with it, especially if you're just starting out. I think that you really have to give yourself a lot of time to like adjust to the training or whatever type of program you're doing or whatever um like goal you have. Running is one of those things that for some people it happens really quickly and they see progress right away. And then other people it just takes a little bit of time. But I do think if you give it enough time and you give it a shot, you will start to see the progress if you're staying. Consistency is obviously like the most important factor, especially with any type of cardiovascular sport. It's like you use it or you lose it. It's one of those things, and you lose it quick. So you really have to be consistent with it. But if you do that, I think the the amount that you will grow and improve, um, I think you'll see, people will see that pretty quickly. And then I think that is often very much a motivator to keep going. Um, and it is for me too. When I first started doing Hyrox, I had kind of a tangent, but I had focused really heavily on lifting for the last few years.
Sure.
And that kind of started like during COVID when a lot of the races were canceled. There wasn't really much of that happening. So I kind of just shifted my focus a little bit because at least the gyms were starting to open back up. And I was like, maybe I'll just focus on like getting strong and um, have like doing something a little bit different. And so I wasn't running as much. So even just now, the time, like the amount that I've improved and gotten back to kind of where I was a few years ago, just in the last like 7 to 8 months has been super motivating for me. And it took like I was really humbled because I know like I've been doing this for so long, like I know what my splits had been on
Yep.
certain things. Then I go to a very heavy lifting background where I'm just running because I just love it, but I'm not racing, I'm not doing like workouts. So then getting back into that, it was like, wow, okay, like this used to be very easy for me and now
Yeah.
it's feeling a little bit hard right now. So,
Yeah. It's super interesting because I couldn't agree more. That's why I think the sport of just like this hybrid style of training and hybrid racing and Hyrox, these things are so interesting to me because, when I was playing basketball, I redshirted my sophomore year and I was in the weight room all the time. And obviously we're running and we're trying to maintain our endurance, but we're not doing long distance running or anything like that. But I got my squat over 400 pounds. And
yeah,
then
that's awesome.
I stopped playing back, but I couldn't run a marathon for sure. But then I stopped playing
Right.
basketball and I trained my body to run a marathon. And then I can barely squat 225 without it like almost crushing me. So it's like, it's crazy to see what your body does and how it adapts. And if you stop training one thing, it obviously, prepares for what you are looking to train for. So that's why I think this hybrid element is so interesting, making sure your body can kind of be somewhere on the spectrum, but also be good enough at both ends to be able to be competitive.
Yeah, I think that's been what one of the things that has been super attractive about it to me is like um I got really heavily into road running again in my like mid to late 20s. So obviously, I ran in college. I ended up having a daughter very quickly after college, so that was kind of a whirlwind. Always was very fit and active. Like I pushed her in my jogger for like 4 years straight, like every day. But I wasn't competing as much. And then when I got back into competing, I was able to get, I actually arguably was running some of my fastest running times, just pure running times ever. Um, but I was definitely not strong like I am now. Then I kind of stopped the running, really focused on strength. I improved I improved my deadlift by like over 100 pounds in a year, my
Wow.
squat by like 80 pounds in a year. And the coolest thing was my bench. Um, I'd gotten up to about like 180 for 1 RM, like on my own. And then I started
Dang.
working with a coach. And in
Oh my
like
God.
in like 6 months, I got up to 205. I weigh 138 pounds. So like
That's
these
insane.
were like numbers. These were numbers that at the in my running days, like would never have dreamt of, you know? Um, and it really taught me a lot about what I hate to say is like the amount of muscle imbalances I had developed over the years. Like I had the 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 deadlift number, the amount of work I had to put in to like it just how much muscle imbalance I had. I had those super weak hamstrings. So really correcting all of that.
Wow.
And that's kind of like what led me to where I am now. And I think hybrid is so cool. This was my original point, and I went off on a very long tangent, but like it's the blend of both worlds. And they're two worlds that I loved separately. And now
Sure.
it's like the combination of both things is super cool. And like I feel so empowered because I'm like, I'm fast and almost as fast as I ever was, but I'm also almost as strong as I've ever been too. And that's been really, really cool to see it like being able to happen simultaneously.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's cool to see that and obviously talk about it because I think to some degree all people I believe should train some version of hybrid. I think it's important to strength train for all the benefits of just like overall health and just strength and protecting your body. And then obviously on the endurance side, making sure you're taking care of your heart and your cardiovascular system and then the fitness side. Like it's just a really cool way to train. Obviously, you don't have to go to the extremes of a competitive world record and break your high rock person, but I do think it's important to have just kind of a blend of just fitness because I really think it keeps your body healthy, safe, and also just keeps your body feeling good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
What was so you ran in college, you ran at UConn, which is incredible. What was your kind of process journey from that point to getting into hybrid racing? I know you talk about, why you like it, but like, how did that kind of start? I know you've have a really successful career in Deco with the Spartan stuff as well as Hyrox. Like, what kind of led you into it and how did that kind of start?
So, during, I guess we were kind of like out of the COVID thing. I remember, no, actually, during COVID, that like first COVID summer, and I hate that we have to talk about this, but I don't even, was that 2020, summer of 2020? We'll talk about that. I did my first Murph and I was really just heavily running at the time. And, the gyms were closed for like 6 months at this point, or a few months at this point. And I like struggled so hard on doing the pull ups. It was super humbling, but also like super embarrassing for me. Like I was like, I can't believe that I can't. Granted, it's 100 pull-ups, so that's a lot, but
Sure.
I was like, wow, this did not go the way that I thought it would go. And so that's when I really was like, I gotta hit the weights. Like I gotta get in the gym. Like my new goal was like, I'm gonna absolutely dominate pull-ups. Like I'm gonna become a pull-up queen. Um, and that kind of like led me into really into like getting back into the gym pretty hard. And then the following Memorial Day had come and I suggested to my friends, like, hey, let's do a Murph. And we did a couple like prep class, like workouts. And then we did it. And I did it with no weight, but I think I was like 29 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So unweighted, but obviously I'm fast. So the running part was, not, but I did all the pull-ups and that part was easy because I'd worked super hard at them for like a year. And my friends were like, this was so fun. Like, let's keep doing this. So it basically turned into me kind of putting on these like hybrid style workouts for us twice a week. And we would just meet at like the track outside. And it was summer at the time. And then my gym owner I've been going to, he was coaching me in college. He was one of the first people that really introduced me to strength training. He let us start using the gym in the wintertime and it slowly like built to this 15 to 20 people meeting 2 times a week just because we wanted to get better. And all the workouts were like this hybrid style thing, but we didn't know that there were competitions for this at the time. So we're just like, we'll do 1,000-meter row, and then we'll go do this and this and this. And finally, I have a bunch of friends in the OCR community locally. And one of my buddies, his name's Jarrett Newby. He actually just competed in the Go-Art Games. Like, he was second at Hunter's Battle Bunker, big in the OCR world. He's, has an awesome list of accomplishments. But he's like, hey, there's this thing called Hyrox. I really think you should do it. Like, I think you're going to do really great. And I was like, oh, yeah, that looks cool. Like, looked it up, and I didn't really realize it was an ongoing. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, there's one in New York. I'll just do that one. And I didn't know there was like rankings and championships and Elite 15 and any of that at the time. So trained all summer. The same person, Jarrett, he hooked me up with Rich Ryan, who became my coach. And it's funny because at first I was like, I don't know, I got it. Like, I think I could do it myself, like, he's like, maybe you should just like hear him out. And best decision I ever made, because, my form was certainly not perfect on a lot of things. So Rich really helped me. And I think I worked with him for like 6 weeks leading into my first Hyrox race. Did my first race with a 2-minute, I missed a lap. So with a 2-minute penalty, my time was 1:06.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, for your first time. And he and I kind of talked about like a little bit of a sort of a time goal. And I was at the top end of the goal with the penalty. So then I basically was like, all right, I'm going to give this another shot. And I did an hour 1:56 in Chicago, and I ended up breaking the world record at that time. So in just my second race. So, but like, I owe so much to my friend Jarrett Newby, because had I not like taken his advice, I mean, this has been like the craziest, most awesome, like 7 months of my life. So
I didn't realize that. So wait, so you broke the world record previously before this past record.
yes. So I
Okay.
broke it in November. I also did be right before my first Hyrox. I had also, because like again, I'm just like apparently living under a rock. I had finally learned about DECA as well. So right before my first Hyrox race, I snuck one DECA mile in. I drove 6 hours to Pittsburgh to do one DECA mile. It was the last weekend to get a qualifying time in for the World Championship in DECA. So snuck a time in. I think I ended up being ranked third. I went to Chicago. I did Hyrox. I won. I broke the world record there in my second race. 2 weeks later, I go to the DECA World Championships. I break the world record in the DECA mile, and I won the DECA mile
Jeez.
at the elite DECA mile. And then I was qualified for the Hyrox European and North American championships in Hyrox. So yeah,
So,
it's been like it's been really crazy.
you
So
want to coach me now?
yeah, hey, let me know. I
Let's
do
go.
take athletes. I do coach athletes.
I
So
love it. No, that's super cool. It's funny you bring Rich up. So I spoke to him yesterday, and we were talking about you. Obviously, I was telling him when you were coming on the podcast, and the one thing he said, because he's like, yeah, I coach her, like I send her workouts, but he's like, she's so motivated and so ambitious. She does a lot of it on her own, and she comes up with a lot of her own stuff. And like he was just talking about your ability to handle so much volume and respond to that
yeah.
volume. It's like how intense you train. I want to know more about your training style. Like I think it'd be interesting for what you're wanting and able to share. Like I would love to hear more of like what went into that process of being able to break those records like from a training perspective.
Yeah, so running is definitely my strength. So in my past years, I've always been a very high volume runner. Like even in college, I was running like college is probably a little too much, but I was running about 80 miles a week when I was competing collegiately. As I got older into my 20s and I was racing and starting to do half marathons, I'd get up to about 70 miles a week, but like pretty much around like 60 to 70 is kind of where I always like stuck. So I'm prefacing that because I don't want people to think that to be a good hybrid athlete, you have to run 50 miles a week like I do.
Right.
That's just what I do and what I can handle. And coming from like where I've come from, 50, 40 to 50, I probably dip over 50 every now and then. That's like still like 20 miles less a week than what I've done. So I know like this is kind of my sweet spot where I'm able to handle the hard workouts. I take a couple easy days. I'm doing a long run. So my running is very much like a true runner would be, other than I do one um, very straight running threshold workout a week, which I think is super important. And then I do two Hyrox style compromised threshold running workouts a week. And then the other days are like a couple easy runs and a long run. I do sometimes run 7 days a week. Again, don't recommend it to everybody. This is just because I've been doing it for like 16 years. So I've built myself up to this over a very long period of time. And then I love the strength, as you know, but I do find it hard at times to like I was training conjugate powerlifting. Sometimes it's very hard to hit that type of workout while doing all the hybrid style stuff, just because like I'm trying to go into a run feeling good, not being super sore. So I found that I'll do like two very straight in the gym for like 2 hour big lifting sessions, an upper and a lower. And I do sometimes get to do a little bit more, like maybe a second day. But I found that like doing Metcon work, doing some more CrossFit style lifting workouts, it has kept me very strong muscularly. It's giving you kind of a little bit of that cardiovascular endurance as well, but it's not like blowing my muscles up so much that I'm too sore to run the next day.
Sure.
And that seems to have been a really good pairing for me. So, um, after my first Hyrox race, I signed up with a CrossFit gym, and I kind of avoid a lot of the very like gymnastic style stuff.
Yep.
Like I'm not doing handstand walks, or anything like that.
Yep.
But power cleans, um, a lot of deadlifting, even if it's for higher volume. A lot of that stuff I think has helped me keep my my muscular endurance very strong, but also like allows me to then get it done the next day or hit that next workout just as hard.
Yep.
So
That's super. That's
yeah,
super.
Rich Rich does not give himself enough credit. Like he does program a lot for me. I'm just one of those very lofty people that I'm like, oh, that looked like, I've actually had to scale it back because when I see stuff on Instagram, I'm like, I want to try that. I want to try
Yep.
that. I want to try that. And then the next thing I know, I'm doing like 5 workouts a day. And it's like, all right, that's way too much. But yeah. So
Yep.
that's kind of like the gist.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What does your recovery look like? Because obviously you're going
Ooh.
hard. You have a lot of volume, a lot of intensity with your training. Like, how do you attack recovery? What does that kind of process look like for you?
You know, this is something that I vowed to myself in the new year. I don't typically make New Year's resolutions, but I was like, girl, you got to start stretching. You got to start doing mobility. I am very bad about it. Um, I'm very lucky. Sorry. I'm very lucky that I naturally recovered well.
Yep.
But I really listen to my body. And that is one thing that working with Rich has been great because he programs a lot of my running workouts for me. If I feel like today I don't have it, I'll move it a day or I'll text him. We'll come up with a different type of strategy. I think that's really, really important. It's like sticking to your training plan and being consistent is obviously very important, but you can't ignore what your body is telling you. So there are days where I'm like, I don't typically plan out rest days for myself. I just listen to myself. So if I'm like, listen, I need a day off, then that's when I take a day off. If I feel good, then I typically wait until I have that feeling of I really need a day off today.
Yeah.
Um, just because like, you're trying to get a lot done. And when you're a parent and you're working, if I feel good, sometimes I don't want to like if I have the time and I feel good, I don't want to sacrifice that day, like, cause I know something might come up the next day. So I'm sorry, the mailman must be walking by and I have a small attack dog. So,
You're good. No
um,
worries.
so that's kind of what I do. I'm really big on my supplements. I take collagen, I take creatine. I actually take like a turmeric joint supplement because that's super important for me these days. My knees are like, what are you doing? So I try to be good about my supplementing and my food. And I think that has helped me a lot in my recovery, like making sure I'm nourished properly, fueling myself has been huge, huge, huge for me. And I think people that can be almost as important as the training. Because a lot of the time the training's not going to go well if you're not fueling yourself correctly. So that's been big for me.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And especially when you're training with that intensity, you're burning a ton of calories. Your body needs that for sure just to replenish, which is crazy. I want to know more about the actual race itself that you just did. I kind of want you to take us through a little bit of your experience. I mean, going sub 60 is insane. Like, were these things that you kind of went in knowing that you had a good chance to break that 60-minute mark, or what kind of went through your head during the actual race itself?
Yeah, so I ran in the European Championships in January in the Netherlands, and I ran in Chicago for the North American Championships in February. And both of those races are set up on what they call the grid. And in a normal traditional Hyrox, each station is separate and it's, all in different places. And that's kind of part of the challenge. I know you've done one. That's like
Yeah,
part of the challenge is like
finding where you're
you're
going.
running, finding where you're going.
Yep.
And especially when you're super exhausted can be like kind of hard sometimes. So the grid takes that part away, but and it's really meant for spectators. So it's like all the stations are done in one area. But with that, you have to turn around a lot. So it sucks up a lot of time, which in the bigger normal races throughout the season, like as an example, you have a 200-meter farmer carry, and a lot of the time it's like a straight 100-meter down, straight 100-meter back. And on the grid, you're doing 10 down and backs of 20 meters, and you have to cross a line, turn around, and then come back each time. So the stopping and the starting takes up a lot more time than you think.
Sure.
So when I saw like my times there and I knew what my time was when I had first broken the world record and it was that 61 high, I knew that I could be close to 60. I've grown so much since then. That first Chicago race was in November. It's April now. I know how much work I've put in. Those two championship races in the Netherlands, I came in third. I did an extra lap going into burpee broad jumps. It was like an almost 4-lap course. You get real like you're like, I don't
Yes.
remember what lap am I on. Like I have no idea. I went from being in second to eighth coming into burpees. I'm having a panic attack. I'm looking around like, what happened? Figured it out very quickly. Like, oh my God, I ran an extra lap. Came back into third place, and I was only about 20 seconds behind second. So I had fought my way back the second half of the race. And you know what? The thing I kept telling myself was like, I didn't freaking come all the way over here not to podium. I was like, I flew all the way over here to podium, and I, was one of the favorites coming in. I had the second fastest time of the year.
Yep.
Um, so, I was like very motivated in an angry way when that happened. And then in Chicago, I felt like I ran a super tough race. Um, I went out really hard, and I kind of established myself very, very early. Um, and ultimately ended up coming in second. And there was a lot of changing going on between the top three, which was Lauren Weeks, myself, and Swedish athlete Michaela Norman. And so after that, I was just like, I'd ran almost close to my PR on the grid. And so I knew how much time, like, you can kind of compare your times a little bit. And I'm like, all right, like, there was another 20 seconds to Farmers because of the turns, and there was another 20 seconds here because of the turns or whatever. So I knew, like, realistically, I felt like I was in shape to be close-ish to 60 minutes. So that was kind of my goal. Um, this was like a tune-up race. I've only run 4 solo races ever.
Wow.
And I'm in the world championship coming up in 5 weeks. So I was kind of just like, I just want race experience. Because you learn and you take away so much from every race that you do, that I was like, all right, I want to see right before Worlds what's going well, what have I improved on, what do I need to keep working on in the next few weeks. And of course, I had like a goal in mind, but every course is different and the layout's completely different. So not every course is conducive to like running a PR. But this course, it just worked out really well. Um, it was a 2.5 lap course, and so we had really long straightaways.
Hmm.
And that's like every runner's dream, is having the long straights, not a ton of laps where you're getting confused. And it kind of felt like being on a track.
Wow.
Um, so that was awesome. The first half, though, I will say, all of the doubles were going on. So at one point, I didn't even know, because of how much weaving I was having to do. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be that great of a time, because again, you're not sure like how much time that's sucking up. Because you're trying to get around people. I kept
Yeah.
yelling to people like between, and like I just run in between them, because they're in doubles, they're all running next to each other because they have to stay with their partner. So
Yep.
it's a lot harder to be weaving through them than it is to be weaving through just one person.
100%.
Um, so like that was kind of an initial thought, like I don't know, but my sleds went really well. Um, like it just felt good. I didn't feel super fatigued running after. But my like bigger strategy was to push my running as hard as I could, and then be kind of not complacent on the stations, but just relaxed. Like I wanted to go into the stations, obviously working hard, but I wanted to be very like in control. And the interesting thing was that that strategy ended up yielding some of my fastest stations ever.
Wow.
So that was really cool, because I think we tend to look to the people next to us, and I like see someone pushing super hard. So then I'm pushing super hard, but then maybe I'm more fatigued on my next like push or the run off the push. And then so like whatever time you might have gained pushing a little bit harder, you might end up losing right away on the run right after. So this strategy seemed to like just work very well for me as an athlete. And I think the funniest thing is, in the live stream, there's all this chatter going on of like, she's this much far ahead. She's this much far ahead. Like, she's going to do it. I had no clue. No one is
Really?
relaying this to me. I'm looking at my watch, just like, I think I'm good. I think I'm going to get it. I have no idea how far ahead I am. I've like no idea until kind of like the last. So I'm coming to the run off of lunges, and I look down and I'm coming up with a worst case scenario, and this is what I do every race. I'm like, all right, if this run is 5 minutes, okay, now mind you, all of my runs at this point have been like 3:46. But worst case scenario, I'm like, if this is a 5 minute run, I have 4 minutes to do the wall balls and I'll still break the record. I'm not even thinking about 60 yet at this
Yeah.
point. I'm thinking I'll break the world record if I have a terrible run for me. That would not be that would be like what happened to her, you know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then if I did my worst wall ball time I've ever done, um I could still get the record. So that's a great feeling, right? You're
Sure.
like, all right, that's because that's probably not going to happen at this point.
And you were able to
Um,
calculate all that on the fly. Like you were doing that
yeah,
math.
I'm just
Wow.
running and I'm like, all right, it's 51. I got 9 minutes, you know?
Yep.
Um, so I come into wall balls and I kind of look down and I like the camera guy was like, oh my God, she's smiling. Like she knows. But like still you're going through the wall balls and at this point I give 100 wall balls and I have no idea what I'm doing anymore. My body is just going. My heart is like out of my chest. I'm like, I don't know if I'm breathing. I'm just trying to listen to the count. I can barely hear him. He's standing right here. It was the coolest feeling ever. Everyone is just rallying around me. This is why I love Hyrox so much. It's the environment is just dope. It is just
100%.
electric. Everyone is so supportive, and you know, and I've become very good friends with a lot of the people who work for Hyrox and just the community itself. So it was amazing having so much support. But with that, I'm like, I don't know what number I'm on. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just going through the motions. I ended up, I actually got no reps on two wall balls because I just kind of like duffed them because I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, so, and the, like, again, I have no idea what the time is. Like, no one is telling me in the live stream, this, from my understanding, they're all like, oh my God, the time is this, the time is this, the time is this. I have no idea. Totally forgot I have a watch on my wrist. Like, I run up the stage, literally have a watch with the time on my wrist, and I'm waiting for the board to say the official time. And when I saw the 58, I was like, oh my God. Like, because they're saying on the guys emceeing are saying she's going to go under an hour.
Wow.
But is it a second or is it a minute? Like,
Yeah.
that's a big difference. I didn't know. So when I saw the 58, I was like, holy shit. It was to get it and get it by that much
Yep.
felt just unbelievable. And I owe so much of it to Rich because like we went over the strategy and he knows me as a person. So he's like, stick to the strategy because,
Yeah.
we all get very hyped up and then the adrenaline's going and sometimes you maybe forget how to approach it for the long haul and you go a little too hard out the gate. So yeah, so it worked well and it was just one of the coolest moments like of my life.
Wow.
So
So
yeah.
cool. Congrats. I
Yeah.
mean, that's amazing. It's so cool. And this is kind of what I want to talk to you about next is just like the overall sport of high rocks obviously is growing super fast. And to see you, obviously emerging as a leader in the sport. I mean, it's just so interesting. And yeah, I mean, you should be super proud. It's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been I think we very briefly touched on a little bit of my like other life story. Like I have the sports story and I've always been very um just a very motivated athlete, always push myself whether I have a race or goal or competition or not. Like I'm the crazy lady in the gym like that everyone's like, what is she even training for? And I'm just like, life, like nothing, just life. Um, but I love that I've been able to be what I hope is an example of what you can do or accomplish when you set your mind to something and you don't put limits on yourself. My personal life, like I'm a single mom. I was 23 when I had my daughter. She's 8 now. I'll be 32 next month. And my 20s, like I struggled. I went through a divorce. Just being a young parent, and I was a full-time single mom for many years. My ex was in active duty military, so I moved home and I had to start from square one, and I had like no work experience, so trying to like get out into the real workforce after college, but having a toddler and trying to make ends meet and all of those things, like it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy. I work a full-time normal job like a lot of people. I think some people think I'm a full-time athlete because they just see that like the Hyrox stuff and they're like, oh, that's so cool. Like she's must be a full-time athlete. Like I'm not. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't call them sacrifices because I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything. Like this is my passion. So for
Wow.
me, it's like a chance, like every workout I do, it's like a chance to grow and get better and to see what I then can do in my next competition or whatever. But my daughter makes a lot of sacrifices to support me. We're at the gym a lot. I've bought a lot of equipment this year after this stuff sort of happened so I can have things to do at home. Like I did a living room workout with my box and a bunch of dumbbells today. But my daughter has been such a trooper, and it's not easy. Like she has her own activities. She's playing sports. And a lot of the time it's dragging her to the gym at 7 o'clock at night for an hour because I have to get what I need to get done. And there's so many positives to that too, because she is seeing an active lifestyle firsthand and goal setting firsthand and
Yep.
just all those things that I think as women we want our daughters to see. And it makes me feel super empowered as a mom because whether she becomes an athlete later in life or not, I think that I'm hoping that seeing what I've been able to do, I just hope it like inspires and motivates her later on that and shows her like you can do anything, if you really set your mind to it. And I hope that I get to be kind of that example for all women, but especially moms, because I think we tend to sacrifice our own identity a lot for our kids and we put ourselves last a lot. And I did that for a lot of years. But being empowered to say, hey, you know what, this time for me to go train, this is time that I need for myself that makes me a better mom or better person or whatever. I think, that's been one of the most amazing parts of this journey for me.
It's amazing. It's
So
so cool. Yeah, my mom and I are super, super close, and I saw how hard she worked as we were growing up and the sacrifices she made. Like she 1000% motivates me. And just being able to see that and now grow up to, do what I do now, it's like she's a big part of the reason I am where I am. So I'm sure your daughter is going to have a very similar experience of getting to see and witness and just be a part of, your life and seeing your dedication and drive. I think that's super, super powerful.
yeah, I do too. I do too. And that's like a huge part of my why, like she's a
Oh,
huge part of the why for me, of why it's like I got to keep going and keep proving more and more to myself. So
it's a feeling that way. I feel like if you can truly figure out something that you're doing that's bigger than yourself and you're making an impact on other people, and that's like a big part of this podcast. It's been why I wanted to continue to do it. It's like that is truly winning in life. That's success. It's like if you can be the best version that you can possibly be and have no regrets, but that lifestyle, that choice is gonna make other people better and you're gonna be making a bigger impact. That's dope.
yeah, I totally agree. and we did a like an interview in Hyrox, and they asked us that. They were like, "What's your biggest fear?" And for me, like my biggest fear is not living up to my full potential. Feeling someday that like I could have done more, I could have given more, or maybe I could have, like having that regret of like maybe I should have done this, or maybe I should have pushed this harder, or I should have taken that opportunity, or whatever the case may be, like not living up to that, what I feel like is my full potential. That's my biggest fear. And so this journey has been great in so many ways because it's totally pushed me out of my comfort zone. Like I'm I've I'm coming into this experience, and I told myself like take every opportunity you can. Take every call, take every meeting, do every podcast, because you never want to look back and say what if, you know? So that's kind of been like my little mantra, with the very quick success and that I've fortunately had. But I totally agree with you. It's like
So
laying it all out there, is super important.
it's the best. I love it. So you are obviously prepping for Worlds. That's coming up at the end of May in Manchester, England. As we wrap this up, this has been such a good episode, and you're amazing. I appreciate you taking the time. What is kind of your mindset going into this World Championship, and how are you kind of preparing yourself physically and mentally to compete in the Worlds?
Well, I definitely feel very confident in myself right now. But with that being said, like I compete against some unbelievably talented women. So I am certainly not counting anybody out. Think that would be really foolish of me. So while I just ran a great, great time and I'm super happy and proud of it, like nose to the grindstone now, it's time to really kind of like lock in the things that I feel like I still have a little bit of work to do on and maintain everything else. So, um, yeah, it's been a whirlwind this week. But it's like we're back to work, you know. I gave myself a couple days to physically recover. That took a little longer than I thought. I felt great after, but then, you go on that run and you're like, wow, like legs, like I thought I felt great. And then I
Yeah,
tried to do this hour run and my legs were like, not today, but yeah, really, it's, I've definitely, I'm not subtle. I've never been subtle. So this was not subtle. So I'm sure I put a pretty big target on my back. I know my competitors, I'm sure, while they're so many have reached out in support and being very happy for me, which is amazing. I'm sure they're like, all right, like it's go time. And they're probably pushing even harder now. So I got to do the same thing, you know?
sure.
Um, it's my first world championship, so I'm definitely nervous. It's the biggest probably event I've ever done in my life. So even bigger than some of the races I've done in college. So trying to really keep believing in myself, not letting the hype of that level of competition psych me out. I think I'm pretty good about that in general. Um, and just believing in the
Hmm.
work that I've done up to this point, believing in the success that I've had. Like I'm here for a reason. So keeping my mind like focused on that and not allowing the doubt to creep in, which it's easier said than done. And we
Yes.
all go through it. Not a single one of us, no matter how elite, doesn't have those moments where you're like, did I do enough? Oh no, like am I fit enough? Am I ready? We all go through that to
Sure.
some degree. For me, I'm usually pretty good at combating it, because I believe it so heavily in Rich, in myself, in our team up, in the process, in the training. It's clearly worked for me to this point. So like there's no point in doubting it. It's like why waste my time and energy on doubting that when I could just instead say, hey, the work's done. I've done everything that I could do. And that like so really focusing my mind on that and that kind of mentality for the next 4 weeks. And then yeah, just locking it in. I have a couple more weeks of just really high intensity, and then it'll be a little bit of pulling it back and just really getting ready. And I'm super excited because Hyrox has allowed me to travel a lot as well, which has also been amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I'd never been to Europe until this year, and now I'll be there 4 times in less than 12 months. So, like, what an awesome opportunity that has been just in and of itself. Just getting new experiences and like getting to experience different culture, meeting people from all over the world in this Hyrox space. That's been super, super cool and rewarding. So I'm excited. I'll be in London and then I'll be in Manchester. Um, so that'll be, yeah, so that'll be really cool. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. But like truly the test. It's every race for me is just kind of like the icing on the cake. It's like I love the process of training. And I really think you have to if you're going to compete at a high level. You really have to love what you're doing because otherwise it's like it can get so difficult and monotonous mentally. So it's just, this world championship is the ultimate test for me for this year. So yeah, I like can't wait to see what I can do and what I can do under pressure, a lot of pressure. So
That's so cool. I'm so pumped for you, and I'm really glad you touched on what you said because we've brought on some really cool people on the podcast, and I think a lot of people talk about like how do you become successful, but what I don't think a lot of people talk about is once you've seen success or achieved success, how do you maintain it and keep your mind in a position where you can go get more, and not to like hyper focus on achievement and like all, but at the same time, like you said, the work's been put in. You can rest easy knowing that you've given it all you have, and I think that's what a lot of people struggle with is that
yeah,
fear, that doubt. Once you have succeeded, it's like, oh my, was that a fluke? Like, am I going to be able to do that again? But that strong mindset of look, like I'm a hard worker. I'm putting the work in. I deserve to be here because I've earned it. It wasn't given to me. Everything you've accomplished, you didn't just wake up and become the world record holder. Like you worked for that. And
right.
that's that same mindset, that same like hustle will carry you on to all the future achievements that you're gonna, earn.
Thanks. I hope so. I think another thing to like piggyback off of you, I think what we don't do enough of, and I've been super guilty of this, is like especially when I was in college, was we focus on all the things that went wrong and we tend
Mm.
to forget all the things that went right or focusing on all the things that went right too. And so every race I talk about, okay, here's what I need to work on, but I just as much talk about all the things that went really well. Um, and Rich and I just had this conversation like, hey, what stations did you feel like you did great on? Even though I got the time that I wanted and all of those things, it's like when we're super competitive as athletes, I think our immediate response is like, I didn't do good on this. Like I need to focus on this. And taking all of the small wins, whether the time was what you wanted, whether the place was what you wanted, or the outcome was what you wanted or not, going back and looking on every part that you won on, I think is super, super, super important because it can get really kind of toxic if you're only focusing on what went wrong. And I think people can get really tired of what they're doing if that's what they're thinking about all the time too, you know?
Totally
So
agree.
like small wins I think are really important. And those are the things that I think will have kept me going towards bigger goals and will keep me going towards bigger goals in the future.
I love it. Let's go. You got me fired up. Meg, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been really a really good episode, and I've just loved hearing your story and everything that you're doing to inspire so many people and all the success you're having. You absolutely deserve it, and I cannot wait to see you crush worlds.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's been so nice connecting with you. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome.